And breaking news tonight, the National Weather Service confirming Isaias did spawn a tornado. That tornado on the ground in Westport, where a waterspout was captured during the storm. On Sunday, a different storm system brought two tornadoes in Litchfield County, an EF0 in Sharon and an EF1 in Falls Village. Let's get you to Chief Meteorologist Rachel Frank right now, tracking it all for you.
Yeah, a lot of people in Westport saying, sure looks like a tornado ripped through my town. And if you were one of those folks, you'd be right. And they kind of did this in an unorthodox way. Usually the National Weather Service is boots on the ground, kind of investigating damage. But there is so much damage across the region. They decided this time around to look at that video, the same video that we just showed you of that water spout. It coincided with the exact minute that Saugatuck Shores ended up seeing a roof ripped off a home. That combined with the fact that there was a lot of rotation on radar. They talked to emergency management officials and they made that classification an EF1 tornado, maximum winds 95 to 105 miles per hour. It briefly touched down, then lifted up and likely traveled north 1 to 2 miles into the Saugatuck River as a funnel cloud before it ended up dissipating. This was between 1:40 and 1:41. So we say brief, we mean a really brief touchdown. A lot of folks saying, okay, it looks like a tornado touchdown at my house too. The National Weather Service is not doing any more investigations that we know about at this time, but there have been a lot of confirmed tornadoes by Isaias all up and down the East Coast. North Carolina, 12 tornadoes, 8 in Maryland, 7 in Virginia, Delaware, 2, Pennsylvania, 2, New Jersey, South Carolina, and finally Connecticut. 1 confirmed tornado. It really wouldn't surprise me. There were so many cells that were rotating in Connecticut. It's even possible that there was another brief touchdown in the state, but not as much evidence to support it. That's why the National Weather Service won't be doing any more investigating. And most of those tornadoes that result as a result of tropical storms moving inland are fairly weak. EF1s were the majority, EF0s following closely behind.